Hey everybody, thank you so much for tuning into Morning Calm Studios channel here on YouTube. Today I want to go over all of the parts and pieces that it takes to make an effective recording studio. So I get this question a lot, so I want to just go over what those basic elements are so we can get you up and running, or maybe even change your game to start getting into some more quality stuff, just some of those basic things that you need to know to get started. Thanks for tuning in. All right, everybody, welcome back to the channel here. Yeah, today we're going over the basics of how to make a recording studio. What exactly do you need to get started? So get these questions a lot, so hopefully this will help kind of unpack it a little bit, looking at some of that more hard to find information sometimes. So let's all condense it all down here. So the first thing that you're going to need to consider is what source are you looking for? So number one is we need to have a way to get audio into the computer. It starts with how are we recording? What are we recording? So we have microphones. That is a great way to start. We've got instruments that we might be playing. So we get those elements into the computer, but how? So that's where part two comes into this equation. So one of the things that you're going to need right off the bat is you're going to need some type of a audio interface. So there are a lot of them. This is just one example, but these have some certain elements in there that have to be on it for it to get in. So yeah, you can go by different manufacturers, but at the end of the day, it should have these fundamental pieces to it. The number one thing you want to have in there is some type of an input. So in this case, we have a combi jack here where you can still plug in a microphone cable, but it's got a hole in the middle here so you can plug in that instrument cable. In this case, it also has a separate instrument cable in called a high Z. It is designed just for instrument level signal versus just microphone level. The other thing that you're going to have that's super important is you have to have a USB or FireWire or something that's going to allow it to get into the computer itself. So what these are going to do is something very important, which is it's going to take all of that signal and it is going to start to chop it up. So you've heard of things like sample rate, bit depth. So what that means is as the signal is coming into the interface here, mathematically it's being chopped up and going from energy into code that can be read by the computer. Once it's in there, you can do all kinds of stuff to it. And then the second part comes in, which is you got to get it out of the computer. So that's where you're going to have these output sections that are built into this thing. The other thing that you have on some is you actually even have a headphone jack that's built in. This one has a knob on the front that allows you to turn the volume up and down, do a bunch of cool stuff with it. But those are really all of the main parts and pieces to a good interface. So we've got to make that conversion happen. This does it, not only converting it going in, but converting it coming back out. So the next thing that you're going to need is something super important, which is the computer itself and the software. So part three is that editing, what we're going to be doing with the audio once it gets into the computer. So in this case, I've already got Pro Tools pulled up here. So with this session, I just want to quickly go over one other way to get audio in here that doesn't require those three pieces. And some people do want to work this way, but for the most part, we see almost everybody needing some type of a microphone source or getting some type of an audio like an instrument, actual synthesizer, something like that into the computer. So in this case, I've got a software instrument pulled up. So what software instruments do is they work off of MIDI. So we've all heard about MIDI before. So what it does is it creates a pathway that allows you to push down a key, register that data until you lift off and then moves to the next note. So in this case, if I just push down on the note B, it triggers a sound, right? So what it's doing is it's telling the computer, hey, push down this note at this time for this long, and then when you're going to let go. So you can trigger it actually through the software like I was just doing by actually clicking, or you can actually have a keyboard controller where you push on those keys and it registers. You'll have all different kinds of presets that are built in there. So if you just grab something like Cypress keys, So even after that data is recorded, you can go back in later and change the sound. So that's kind of the basics how MIDI work. We've got another version that is super popular. So let me pull up my Superior drummer here. So it looks like a drum set. You can click on things in a lot of ways too that are really cool, as you actually can create grooves. So these are also really useful. Once again, you're putting in the data and then you're using the software to actually make all of the changes for you. So MIDI is a great way to operate. So once you have all of those parts and pieces, you can, take things, you can edit, you can chop up the tracks. On the other hand, when you're done with that, then you can actually use the mixer to actually make changes to the overall volume, set panning, doing all kinds of cool stuff like that. So we're going to want something to edit with. So that's part 3 of the ecosystem, is the computer. So just briefly, let's recap here. You're going to have some type of an input source like a microphone, an instrument that you're playing it, or MIDI. Part 2 is you need to have some type of an interface, something that's going to allow you to transfer that electromagnetic energy into the computer itself. And then part 3 is the computer to actually be able to do all of the conversion as you make edits, add plugins, do all that great stuff. So the last thing I wanted to go over is one of those parts that a lot of folks don't even know exists out there. I live and die by this thing because I think they're crazy helpful, which is a DAC. So a lot of folks have never even seen what these are. So we talked about being able to take the audio into the computer, and then it will be able to be editable, and then it will take that audio back out of the computer. What this is this is a standalone back end system. So we still use the interface to record in, but this is how we're going to listen to everything. So why is a DAC so important? Well, there is a lot of mathematics that is part of recording. So as we're bringing in that signal, we're slicing it up into little pieces. You've probably seen 44.1, you've probably seen 48. So with those two number systems plus some others, 44.1 means 44,000 slices per second actually happening going into the computer. Well, coming out, it's going to reassemble all of that. So that's why DACs are super cool, is because they have what's called a clock in it. So it has a very high quality clock that talks between the computer and the device itself to make sure that as we reassemble, we're as accurate as possible. By doing that, we can release some of that coloration, some of those mistakes that might be happening. It is a huge conversation about what all of that is, but I always like to just explain that it does math better in the conversion going out process. So what does that mean and why is it beneficial? Well, all those decisions that you make along the way when you're doing the editing, when you're doing the mixing, when you're adding plugins and you're tweaking things, we want to be as accurate as possible. So that way, when we take that track out of the computer and we put it on another source, we want to be as close to those decisions as we possibly can be. That's why we call it mix translating. A lot of times mixes don't translate. This just makes it a little bit easier because the math is better. It's just cleaner overall. So I think this is probably one of the most underrated pieces of gear that are out there. So hopefully that was super helpful. As always, if you do have questions, you need anything, hit me up, morningcalmstudios.com. Feel free to reach out at any time. Also, if you're looking for advice, you need some help with mixes, I'm going to be going with some private lessons as well for recording, using Zoom, using some other softwares that are out there, go to training. There's a lot of ways to do this. So be on the lookout for that. But as always, hit that subscribe, hit that like, hit that notification. Let me know. Always happy to help. Give me a call. And remember, the more you do this, the better you get. If you want to really get good, never stop. Pretty simple. Thanks.